What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you in ways you could never imagine? Picture this. You wake up one day, walk into your living room, and life feels just as ordinary as the day before. But then, while going about your daily routine, you stumble onto something that turns your world upside down. That's something? A piece of paper welcoming strangers into your home because it's no longer yours. This isn't just any house. Not a rental, not a temporary place to crash. No, this is your sanctuary. The walls hold your dreams, the garden reflects years of your hard work, and every room tells a story of your life. And even though this house is your pride and joy, it's no longer yours. Not because of disaster or bad luck, but because of the person you thought would do anything to protect you. That's exactly what happened to me. The betrayal went far beyond the cold reality of losing a home. It ripped apart the very fabric of trust and love I had built over years. My husband decided, all on his own, to sell the one place I thought was ours forever. But if you think this is just a story of heartbreak, you're wrong. This is a story of strength, resilience, and ultimately, victory. Stay with me. You're not going to believe the twists, the strategy, and the grit it took to turn the tables on him and rewrite the ending of this story. Grab a comfy seat because you're in for a roller coaster of emotions, suspense, and a lesson in fighting back when every odd feels stacked against you. Before I take you down this path of betrayal and redemption, let's start with a little background. My name is Emma. For most of my adult life, I considered myself to be a straightforward, no-nonsense person who valued love, honesty, and trust above all else. I believed that a good relationship was built on these foundations, and that as long as we had those things, no storm could break us. Enter Mark, my husband, the man I fell head over heels in love with more than a decade ago. We met in the most romantic way possible, in a cozy little bookstore on a rainy afternoon. He was charming, funny, and intelligent. Most importantly, he seemed kind. It didn't take long for us to become inseparable. Within a couple of years, we felt ready to make the big leap. We got married, bought a house, and dreamed of building a beautiful life together. The house we bought wasn't just any house. It was perfect for us. Located in a quiet neighborhood with plenty of space for a garden I had always dreamed of cultivating. We spent countless weekends working on it together, from choosing paint colors for the walls to picking out furniture that felt like us. This house wasn't just where we lived. It was an extension of our personalities, our shared goals, and most importantly, our partnership. I thought we had it all. Sure, like any marriage, there were arguments every once in a while, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Little did I know, those moments of shared laughter and mutual effort were just as fragile as a castle made of sand. And one day, the tide came in to sweep it all away. What happened wasn't something I could have predicted, not even in my worst nightmares. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed. But when you love someone that deeply, you don't question their motives. You trust them blindly, wholeheartedly. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe I just underestimated what I was capable of when my world came crashing down. The relationship dynamics and trust. Mark and I had what most people would call a picture-perfect marriage. He had a stable job. I ran a small business that I loved, and we made it work. We didn't have children, but we had a dog named Charlie who was basically our baby. From the outside looking in, people thought we were one of those couples that had truly figured life out. But over the years, I began noticing subtle changes in Mark. He became overly obsessed with status symbols. He wanted the bigger car, the fancier watch, and the high-powered business connections that seemed to make life more glamorous in his eyes. I chalked it up to ambition. I admired his drive, in fact. But in hindsight, his growing obsession with material success was coming at the cost of what really mattered, and I was only beginning to realize it. We used to talk about everything, things big and small, from which new show we should binge watch to deep discussions about where we saw ourselves in 10 years. But as time went on, those conversations grew fewer and farther between. Instead, Mark's focus shifted almost entirely to work. There were phone calls late into the night, emails he insisted on answering during dinner, and an increasing number of networking events that seemed to pop up every weekend. Even with these obvious signs of his distance, I still believed in us. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that once things settled down at work, we'd go back to being the couple we had always been. After all, that's what marriage is about, right? Weathering the storms together. I never once imagined that the person I was weathering the storm with was the very cause of the cracks forming beneath my feet. That fateful day began like any other. I got up, brewed my coffee, and took Charlie for a walk around the block. Life felt ordinary, even comfortable. It was only later, when I was casually sorting through the mail, that I stumbled upon a letter I'll never forget. It was from a real estate company I didn't recognize, printed on expensive stationery. They were thanking Mark and me for the smooth and successful sale of the property at our address. My hands shook as I read those words, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I reread the letter at least 3 times, hoping I had somehow misinterpreted it. But there it was, clear as day. My home, my sanctuary, had been sold without my knowledge. And what's worse, the letter made it sound like something we had both agreed on. I rushed upstairs to confront Mark. He was sitting at his desk, looking more relaxed than someone about to have their secret revealed should be. When I burst into the room, letter in hand, he barely looked up. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. His reaction was astonishingly casual. "Oh yeah, about that," he started, but before he could go on, I cut him off. "You sold our house, our home, and you didn't think it was important to mention that to me?" He tried to explain, saying something about how the house was becoming a financial burden, how this decision was in our best interest. But his words were just white noise to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The moments that followed were a blur of anger, heartbreak, and overwhelming disbelief. The house wasn't just property. It was where I envisioned growing old, where I felt the safest, where my entire idea of love and partnership lived. And this man, the one I had vowed to love forever, had taken it all away with the stroke of a pen. But if he thought this was the end of the story, he had another thing coming. After Mark revealed his so-called reasoning behind selling our house, I couldn't process what I was hearing. Every word coming out of his mouth felt like it was drenched in lies or, worse, selfishness disguised as logic. He talked about financial burdens and how freeing ourselves from the responsibility of a mortgage would set us up for a better future. While he rambled on about spreadsheets and deals, I stood there paralyzed, clutching the letter of betrayal. Inside, a storm was brewing. My mind raced between disbelief, fury, and deep, soul-crushing heartbreak. This house wasn't just bricks and walls. It was the place I'd poured my heart into for years. The memories of painting the living room together, holding Christmas dinners with family, and planting flowers in the backyard that blossomed every spring flashed before my eyes. How could someone erase all of that with one decision? One I wasn't even a part of? I remember sitting on the edge of our bed later that evening, staring at the floor and feeling nothing. You know that quiet, numb feeling you get when there are simply too many emotions to process at once? That was me. Charlie, our sweet dog, rested his head on my lap, as if he could sense the turmoil I was in. I stroked his fur absent-mindedly while my mind kept replaying the events of the day like a broken record. A part of me wanted to scream, to accuse Mark further, to demand that he reverse the sale, but I quickly realized that screaming wasn't going to undo what had already been done. More than that, I knew deep inside that the man standing across from me was no longer the partner I thought I married. He was operating on a completely different wavelength now. Any hope that I could reason with him evaporated as I watched him scroll through his phone that night like nothing major had happened. And that's what made it worse. His nonchalance, his casual shrug at my pain, showed me just how far apart we had grown. While I mourned the loss of our shared dreams, he was already moving on to whatever he deemed better opportunities. The betrayal wasn't just the sale of the house. It was the coldness in his demeanor, the complete disregard for my voice. It was a wake-up call I never wanted to hear but desperately needed. That night, I made a choice. I could shrink away, accept Mark's actions, and lose both my home and my dignity. Or I could fight, and not just fight to get my house back, but fight to reclaim my independence, my voice, and ultimately, my sense of identity. The realization brought with it a strange sense of calm. While I still felt the sting of betrayal, I now had a glimmer of determination brewing deep within. Mark had made his move in this twisted chess game, but little did he know, I still had plenty of powerful pieces left to play. The first thing I did was educate myself. After the initial wave of emotions subsided, I started looking into the legalities of property sales, specifically the rights of spouses in situations like mine. Late into the night, I pored over articles, forums, and case studies. What I found was both frustrating and empowering. Legally, Mark had every right to sell the house, as his name was also on the deed. However, his decision to do so without consulting me could potentially be challenged under certain circumstances. This small sliver of hope ignited something within me. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about standing my ground and refusing to be steamrolled by someone I had once trusted with my whole heart. My first course of action was to build a support system. I confided in my best friend Laura, who had always been in my corner. The moment I told her what happened, she pulled me into a tight hug, her eyes filled with disbelief and anger on my behalf. "You're not going through this alone," she said firmly. and she meant it. Together, we devised a plan. Step 1 was documentation. I started gathering every shred of evidence I could find related to the sale. Emails, text messages, financial statements. I left no stone unturned. Every document I collected felt like a small piece of armor added to my battle gear. Step 2 was legal counsel. With Laura's help, I found a lawyer who specialized in marital disputes and property issues. During our consultation, the lawyer listened intently as I laid out the entire story. She nodded thoughtfully before saying, "We might have a case here. It won't be easy, but there's a way to push back." Those words were all I needed to hear. While the legal wheels were set in motion, I also reached out to the real estate agent who had handled the sale. At first, they were hesitant to speak with me, citing confidentiality agreements. But after I pressed them with the emotional weight of my situation and hinted at potential legal repercussions, they relented. They told me everything they knew about the transaction, including the names of the buyers and the timeline of events. With this information in hand, I moved on to the next phase of my plan. I decided to contact the buyers directly. It was a bold move, one my lawyer wasn't entirely sure about, but I felt it was necessary. I wanted them to see me, not just as a name on paper, but as a real person whose life had been upended by Mark's actions. When I finally sat down with the young couple, I was careful to approach the conversation with grace and honesty. I poured my heart out, explaining what the house truly meant to me and how I had been blindsided by the sale. To my surprise, they were incredibly understanding. They admitted that they had felt uneasy during the process, sensing that something wasn't quite right. Ultimately, they agreed to delay the closing date, giving me more time to sort things out. Mark, on the other hand, was livid when he found out what I was doing. He accused me of meddling, of complicating things unnecessarily, but by this point his words had lost all power over me. I was in control now, and I wasn't going to stop until I had regained what was rightfully mine. After weeks of legal wrangling, negotiation, and sleepless nights, the resolution finally came into view. The buyers, backed by their own sense of morality, chose to back out of the deal entirely. The real estate agent, eager to avoid further drama, nullified the agreement. The house was no longer sold. But that wasn't the only victory. Along the way, I had also made another life-altering decision. I filed for divorce. Mark's betrayal had opened my eyes to truths I had been avoiding for years. His obsession with success, his disregard for my feelings, and his willingness to make unilateral decisions had eroded the foundation of our marriage long before this incident. Moving forward wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether this fight was worth it. But every time I looked at the house, at the garden I had planted with my own 2 hands, I was reminded of why I was doing this. This wasn't just about reclaiming a physical space. It was about reclaiming myself. A year later, I'm standing in what is now solely my home. The garden is in full bloom. Charlie is chasing butterflies in the yard, and I finally feel a sense of peace I haven't felt in years. The house may not have changed much on the outside, but inside it's a completely different story. Audience engagement questions. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever faced a betrayal so deeply personal that it forced you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about love and trust? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found your own strength and resilience. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's the importance of advocating for yourself. People will try to take what's yours, whether it's a dream, a home, or your sense of self-worth, but no one can take away your determination, your resilience, or your ability to turn pain into power. Trust is sacred, but when it's broken, it doesn't have to spell the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of a new chapter, one even better than the last. Thank you for letting me share my story. If you found it inspiring or relatable, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Life isn't easy, but it's the struggles that shape us into who we're meant to be. Until next time, remember to stand tall, fight for what you believe in, and never underestimate the power of your own strength. See you in the next video.